Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Secret Origins of Mint Condition. I am one of your hosts, James, and we have spent this year podcasting, celebrating many milestones in the comic book pop culture universe. We started this year podcasting with celebrating 50 years of Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
We recently celebrated 40 years of the Search for Spock, 85 years of the Batman, and today we are celebrating 40 years of Marvel's Secret Wars. And to help me do that, I have assembled Earth's mightiest podcasters have been brought to Battle World to help us break this episode down. So, of course, joining me is Joe.
Thank you, James. 40 years. Oh, Lord, I'm getting old.
And also joining me is Chris.
If I can find my unmute button, I'd be able to say, hey, y'all, but here we are.
There we go. And of course, joining us is the master of all things Marvel.
Yeah.
Arco is back with us again as well.
All right.
Thank you very much for having me. I am looking forward to this one.
Argo, it went by fast. You joined us for the 50th anniversary of Wolverine, and now here we are celebrating 40 years of Secret Wars. So,
yeah, oh boy, I talk about feeling old. I've been through it all.
I told you guys this before we started, and I think I'll just give the rundown for the audience as well. We're doing this in two halves, audience, because technically Secret Wars' 40th anniversary is over the course of 1984 through 85. It's Marvel's first maxi series of 12 issues, so that's kind of a lot to cover, especially with the history of Secret Wars. So we're going to kind of just give a little history of it, our original introductions to it, some maybe impressions, and then we'll talk about the issues itself. I'll start off just saying Secret Wars, and I think, Argy, you will say this too, was my introduction to Marvel characters in general. I didn't read the comic until many, many years later. In fact, I can say, I don't think I've read the comic until the last 10 years. This is only my second time cracking Secret Wars open. So, but my parents, as generous as they were, I had all the toys. This is how I learned about Spider-Man and Captain America and Doctor Doom and Magneto and Daredevil. Daredevil, who's not even in the series.
No, that's right.
Yeah, they threw him in anyway. What the hell?
Wolverine, Wolverine with the attached plastic claws.
Yeah.
But I love those characters. I played with my Spider-Man character so much that all the webbing was rubbed off his body. He was just a red and blue guy at some point. Daredevil lost his double D, and and Captain America's face was all blue because the skin tone paint on him was rubbed off. So this was my introduction to the Marvel Universe.
Toys.
It would be years before I picked up a comic book, but so Secret Wars, well, I can't say the comic has a lot of pull for me. The impetus for it of why it was created to sell toys, it worked. Jim Shooter, wherever you are, it worked. I got all the toys. So that's my introduction to it. Joe, since you had a lot of comic history behind you coming into this, what was your first experience picking up Secret Wars?
Well, I remember the toy commercials, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And I bought those toys for my nephews. They were, Stephen was about 5, Frank was about 8, I guess. So if I remember correctly, and you can correct me, Arco, they were molded plastic and they weren't articulated, right? The figures?
They were molded plastic. They were articulated only at the joints on some of them, for the most part. And something like Dr. Octopus's arms, where now you would have it all bendy and can do whatever, it would break off immediately. So totally broken.
Just like a Gumby back in the day.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
No. I remember this book coming out. Was I excited about it? I don't think so. I mean, back in the day, obviously there's no internet, and so anything forthcoming was done through house ads, or you might find out at a comic convention. So I might have been at a New York Comic Con in the summer previous in '83, but I don't know if they mentioned it then. Or Arco, when did the first issue hit? Do you remember?
The first issue came out in May of 1984, and it ran through April of 1985.
Right. So I think I remember being at a con in '84 and people talking about it. Mike Zeck, the artist for most of them, was an up-and-coming artist. He had a great run on
love Mike Zeck.
Great artist. I got to be truthful. You said, James, you only read it twice, right? I think this might be my second time reading it. I don't think I read it after it initially came out. So I never went back to it. But I don't remember much about it. When I was reading it now, Arco, I didn't remember big spoiler, folks, that they all died at the end of issue 11. I forgot that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So for me, it's almost like reading it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into my impressions about story in general. But one thing I do know, we said this off air just a few minutes ago, it sold a lot of toys.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the top selling book of 1984-85. Every issue was on the top. If you go to Comic Cron, you will see that. And every issue averaged about 250,000 copies sold, which was very, very good at that time.
Yep.
And it would be like now they'd sell their souls to the devil if they could get the comic book to sell that.
Oh, you kidding me? If you could do 20,000, they'd sell it.
Exactly. So that's what I remember about it. Not much in the way of its impact on me. I read it. I guess I enjoyed it. I do know it set things up that I did like, especially that Thing series that started, right? Arco, that started right after that?
No, it was going on at the time. And they just worked its way into it. And it's funny, that's actually the one thing that I didn't like. So that's funny.
I was like Ben Grimm. So that's my impressions. Basically, I really want to hear what Chris is going to say about that.
Yeah, can we go to Chris first? Because
let's go to Chris and then we'll go to Arco.
Yeah, because I read his text last week.
All right, Chris.
They were hysterical.
No, so I do want to share what I think, but I think also I want to temper some of that, and the reason why is because I want to be curious about it. There's definitely stuff that I don't like, and I'm trying to figure out, like, is it just that I have raised expectations based on stories I've read? Is it that some of it doesn't age well, like all the jive talk? That,
Well, yeah, Rhodey.
Right, we see Rhodey does, and then we see the reaction to the jive talk, like when he says something to I think it's Photon when he says something to her.
No. Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel. Get it right.
You're right.
Put him in his place, though.
No, it's okay.
So when he says something to Captain Marvel, she's like, I always thought he was so sophisticated.
Worldly, yeah.
Worldly.
Erudite,
Okay, so like, right, so we get that, like, some of that frankly, the racial stereotypes, it was never good in the first place, but it also really doesn't age well. It's very noticeable. So we know some of that already. I think actually, and I'm not trying to do a cop-out here, I will circle back, but what I really want to ask the three of you is, what are the things that you found interesting about this story? And the reason I'm asking is because I had difficulty finding, now I'm only halfway through, I've only read up to issue 6 like we were going to cover today. Okay. But so far, I'm not really interested in anything that's happening other than what Doom is up to. So that's why I'm curious, what do you guys find interesting about this story?
Okay, so let me just give you my thoughts first on it. And
yeah, please.
Unlike I guess I'm going to be the outlier on this panel, and that's fine. I absolutely loved this series. Okay. Not only did I love it, but I have, when James texted me 2-3 weeks ago about doing Secret Wars, I immediately thought that it was the 2015 Secret Wars version that we had spoken about that he got me into. And I was like, yeah, sure. Okay, we'll do it. Cause the Russo brothers are going to be doing something. Well, but when he told me it was 1984, I was jumping up and down. I have not only read it, I've read it easily a dozen times. A dozen times. This was my first comic book that I ever bought, issue 11. I knew who Captain America was. I knew who the Fantastic Four was. I just never read a comic book. All right, growing up in the 70s, you saw all these characters on television, cartoons, and I love Spider-Man and all that stuff. So, but I never read a comic until I picked up issue 11, and I was. Not only was I blown away, but they were all blown away because they all died in that issue. So, imagine my horror that everybody's dead. And I'm like, wait, did I miss something? So I went back. I bought all the issues through the years, which is not easy to do back in 1985. Let me tell you something. I guess the fact that 12, 13-year-old Arco loved everything that he was seeing on there. I love the characters I'd never seen before. I didn't know who the X-Men were up until this series. I didn't know who Magneto was. I didn't know who Kang was, Ultron was. So this was my introduction to almost everything that I've loved over the last 30, 40, 50 years of reading comic books. And it started in this series that had put an amalgamation of all of the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, put them all together, just like Battle World, and created this story that a person like myself, jumping in for the very first time, can now enjoy. And you know what? That was the spark that led to all of this insanity that we deal with now. Okay, so as you call me the master of all things Marvel. Thank you, but it only is from Secret Wars. That was it. That was the spark. Without Secret Wars, I would not be where I am today with anything comic books wise. So that's how I feel about it.
That's good to know. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to I thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, there's stuff I don't like, but I really wanted to temper my approach to it more towards curiosity, because I know people find value in these books. There are things that they enjoy, and so that's why I'm like, no, I genuinely want to know. So like, I'm curious, because you've read it so many times over the last 40 years. Is like, how much of where you're at on Secret Wars now and how much you enjoy it, how much do you think is informed by the fact that like, this is what did it for you, this is what made it, versus like, no, I still enjoy it even without that context. Maybe I wouldn't as much, but I still enjoy it. So like,
I how much? 100%. I agree with you that some things have not aged well. I'm one of those people that believes that things that happen in a certain era belong in that era, and I can't blame writers, the pencilers, cartoonists, anybody, any form of entertainment in the 20s and 30s and 40s. People, that's what they said, that's what they did, that's how they believed. That's it. Do I like it? Maybe. If I don't like it, that's fine. I don't have to watch it. But at the time, and since then, I've found a lot of resale value, basically replay value, when it comes to Secret Wars, to really get back into that feeling of what it was like. And I swear to you, it's like every single time I read it, I don't read it every year, but since 1985, when I got the whole series, easily a dozen times since then that's 40 years. So if I had to guess one thing, I would say that being the one person here who read it at their youngest, I think has a big impact on and a different impact. While James, you read it within the last 10 years, you were in your 30s, 40s. Joe, you were already a mature man at the time, and Chris, you're just reading it now. So I mean, so here I am. I'm the one person,
because I agree, I'm not.
I'm the one person that Jim Shooter wanted. He was going for me.
He got you.
Although I was aged out of the toys by that time, don't get me wrong, they were cool as hell.
I made up for that, Arco.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I understand what Marvel was looking back on it. What Marvel was doing, I didn't care that they were trying to sell toys, or they tried to create a comic to go with the toy. I really don't care. To me, it was gold, and the story lives on as far as I'm concerned.
No, I mean, that's great, and I appreciate that insight, because honestly, that is not one of my complaints about this story. Like, just because they did it to sell toys, I mean, when we look at a lot of other things, there's some other purpose that it's not just for the purposes of art, right?
Right.
And that's okay. Like, so I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I appreciate your insight. So thank you for sharing that. Some insight into where you're at. Joe, I know you were about to say something, so I don't want to interrupt.
No, it was a marketing. A great marketing strategy. I mean, was it Kenner Toys, Arco?
No, Mattel.
Okay, I always get them confused.
Well, Kenner had seen success with Superpowers, because with the DC line.
That's right.
Mattel actually lost their license to the DC heroes, and they were shopping around for other heroes. And so someone they found the Marvel characters, and they went to Jim Shooter, and they're like, "Well, we're not sure. Your characters aren't as well known as the DC characters." I mean, back then, at least from the stuff that I've read, Spider-Man was not a household name. Wolverine,
Daredevil.
Daredevil. none of those heroes were household names. Iron Man were like Iron Man, like
Iron Man.
who the heck is Iron Man?
Wasn't a household name when the movie came out in 2000.
Yeah. So Jim was like, no, I think what he said is like, he said that is true, but what in our fan base are hardcore, they know these characters, and he was basically like, I will write you a story that includes all the characters so you can sell these toys, and our fan base will show up and buy not just the toys, they'll buy the book, and you will make your money, which happened. And he did them additional gift. He wasn't asked to do this. He timed the height of Secret Wars issue 6
right around Christmas
with the toy fair. Yeah.
Perfect.
I was thinking that the start of May give you time to ramp it up to get to Christmas. Yeah.
Yep. And they also timed the issue of the black costume coinciding with Toy Fair when they would first display the black Spider-Man figure, so that everything was. So he was like a marketing genius. Again, we could get into it a little bit of maybe this is not Jim Shooter's best piece of writing. As editor in chief, we were just talking about this before the podcast went on. Like, he chose to write it all. Mainly, he chose to write it all because he felt if he gave it to any of the staff writers, some staff writers would feel jealous that they're putting the X-Men characters over the Avenger characters over Spider-Man. And since he was editor-in-chief, he didn't have to deal with that. Maybe he could have had some writers help him a lot, which I was saying, like, he did have some writers help him. Christopher Priest in a recent podcast I was listening to said that Jim Shooter would call them all into a room and said, we're not leaving this weekend until we get Secret Wars mapped out. So while he took the writing credit, I think the entire bullpen basically chipped in to construct.
No, but I mean that's also, that's a sustainable move, and that's a business call that you make, right? Which is, we're going to do this project. We have a very specific goal for this project, which is to sell toys, but also to get our names out there. We want some of these characters to be household names. Like you said, you don't want to create any strife in-house. So if the standard is just this is what the project is, frankly, I think beyond the master stroke of marketing, that's a master stroke of management. It doesn't strike me as, and I could be wrong, it doesn't strike me as ego. It strikes me as there's a way to balance this, and the only way to balance this is to be Switzerland, get everybody in. And everybody can be mad at me, but the writers aren't mad at each other, and there's no jealousy amongst themselves. They can just talk about what an idiot I am. Leave it at that, right? And that's I personally, like, it's interesting because I didn't know some of that, and to me that just sounds like really sound business and really good leadership.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think Jim Shooter, the best we could say about him, this will be a little bit of a Jim Shooter podcast. And Jim Shooter, if you're listening, I met you twice. You're still invited. We'd love to talk to you.
Yes, please. You could defend this work.
We're still waiting for it. But I think Jim Shooter was a pragmatist. Like, you guys can say I'm wrong, but he was very pragmatic about how he ran Marvel. I mean, he brought Marvel back from the brink. Because before he took over, it was about to go bankrupt. The person who owned Marvel at the time, he said, didn't care about the characters, didn't care about the comics. He, as long as Jim Shooter made it profitable and came under budget or on budget, he was like, I don't care what you do, just don't lose money. So Jim Shooter was pragmatic, and he did it. Whatever we think about the writing, which we'll dive into, we all have our various opinions. Like you guys said, it sold more copies than it sold what comic books these days dream they could sell. That many copies. Of a book.
Nothing comes close to that.
I was just looking at it, audience. As we know, we don't do a panel by panel breakdown, but we want to make sure we stop and go to the right spot. So the last thing that happens in issue 6 is when Wolverine slashes the Molecule Man, and that big roller dumpster truck picks up the Wasp and Lizard and in the swamp, and that's where issue 6 ends. So that's as far as we are going to talk about in this podcast.
Yes, and there's that shadowy creature lurking in the heroes,
the shadowy silhouette of
village. Exactly.
So
I don't know.
So I guess
I know Arco knows who it is, but I don't know who it is.
I know who it is.
Well, I know you know.
So listening audience, obviously we've spoiled some things already. This is spoilers. We're all spoiling this. If you've never read Secret Wars, you're about to hear the first half of it. So if you want to pause and read it, that's fine. Otherwise, we're going to dive into it. And, let's circle back to like Chris's, question, like his main thoughts, like what did we take away from it? Obviously we've alluded to it. This was the first company-wide crossover, right? The first, I think, in addition, this was the first time that the entire Marvel universe was together in one issue or one series. Is that correct?
Yes, this followed the which happened, I guess, about 10 years earlier article, the Avengers Defenders War, right? That was the first. That was the first like company-wide cross, but that didn't include the X-Men. It didn't include.
Yeah. So I believe that the very first limited series and the first company-wide, by way of creating characters you've never heard of before or since, was Contest of Champions in 1982, 1983, and that lasted 3 issues, and then this happened a year later. I'm not sure if it was cause and effect, to be quite honest with you.
I think it was a test balloon. I think that Contest.
Yeah, it's possible that something, let's see if this works, and it did work. It was popular, and I enjoyed it for what that was. But this was definitely one where the biggest characters were both on good and evil took center stage. And looking back on it, even though I didn't know who the hell these people were, they were the rogue galleries for each. The rogues for each of the teams are separate, or separate heroes and all that stuff. They were all involved here.
So if we kind of set the stage for the audience, just because, and also for me, because and maybe Chris too, because we're kind of dumping right into this. And Jim Shooter wanted to be part of canon, so we have at this time Rhodey is Iron Man. Does everybody know that Rhodey is Iron Man? And when they go,
no, they do not. And nope.
Okay, so we have Rhodey as Iron Man. We have Susan Storm is not there because she's pregnant.
She's pregnant.
What else?
Can I question? Arco, was she pregnant? Is this the child she lost, or is this Valeria?
No, this is the child she lost. Valeria wasn't born until early 2000s.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Although, she was pregnant for like 3 years. So, time in comics doesn't last. That doesn't, it's stretched out.
That man is still 34,
and
35.
It sure is, and he looks fantastic.
He looks great.
And I guess the thing that I did read some Hulk has Banner's mind, so he's the smart Hulk right now?
Yes. The Hulk went from, in the 80s especially, smart to crazy to, animalistic. This was him at his smartest that they had seen in quite a long time, but he was starting to slip and regress. Right. And after issue 12, and he goes back to his regular series of 299 and 300, he was straight out animalistic.
Right. He doesn't get smart again until Peter David comes along.
Yes, Peter David and the Pantheon and all that. The Pantheon, however you want to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, which I didn't realize that he had a smart period before the Peter David run. So I didn't realize Smart Hulk was something that Peter David didn't create so much as brought back from.
Well, Arco will test this. Even at the very beginning, like in the early '60s, Hulk wasn't Hulk smash. He spoke in full sentences.
Oh yeah, he spoke in full sentences. He was definitely. I mean, this is what the Hulk was. He was Jekyll and Hyde. Yeah. He was Jekyll and Hyde, and even Mr. Hyde, spoke eloquently. He was more brutal and more, what's the word? I don't know, feral. But he could definitely speak, and that's what the Hulk was in the beginning.
Yeah,
it's a real flowers for Algernon kind of thing going on.
Yes,
he knows he's losing it, and the other heroes, like especially like Mr. Fantastic. And I think Cap at some point they play on that, right? Like they kind of pick on him for it.
Well, because they use it,
right.
Yeah, they use it for when they need it. It's not that they're being mean about it, but
but he does. He
stuck under a mountain. Gotta make him angry.
and it doesn't make sense, but it's very much that like he knows what he's losing. He knows he's being manipulated. He falls for the trap anyway, which makes him feel dumber. It all feeds the cycle, and like it does need to be done, but then he ends up being sort of like pointed like a weapon, which feels even worse to someone as smart as Banner. So it is like for me, it feels like a very flowers for Algernon approach to this is a guy with a dizzying intellect with other guys with dizzying intellects, but he is falling behind, and now he's being deployed like a weapon instead of being up there with the brass.
He's a WMD.
I will say I didn't love like the dialogue around it. It was too ham-fisted for me, but I will say I liked that aspect of watching him slip. And other people are like, you're right, Arco, they're not doing it to be mean, but they're also not like being kind to him afterward. Not that as anything but pity, but like it's kind of tough to like watch this decline. Anyway, I'm sorry, James, that was my own little aside, but
no, it's good. It's good because
it's good insight.
No, I like it. Yeah, I was just trying to set the pace for myself and then for the audience, who we're going to be diving into where these characters were in this moment in time, and that's what Jim Shooter, again, what he wanted. He wanted them to be where they were in their stories, and when this was over, they would return to their books and have. His whole thing was like, when you come back from war, you come back changed. So he didn't want this to be a series where things happen and then they never show up again or they don't mean anything. This book laid the groundwork for all the company-wide crossovers, not just here, but DC was doing Crisis. Some people think that Jim Shooter took, Secret Wars maybe from Crisis as well, but that's what you do with the two. That's what the two companies were doing forever anyway. So it's not that big a deal. But for good or for ill, Secret Wars starts the whole company-wide massive crossovers that we have till this day. But this was the first. So So anyway. Let's start off. Who wants to lead off? What's the impetus that brings all these heroes together?
Oh, well, let's. Why don't we just start off with, this was sort of teased for one or two issues in all the big, at least the very last issues before of the main comics of Fantastic Four, of Amazing Spider-Man, Thor, even in the Avengers. This was teased, or the very last issue before they all started, they all disappeared. They were just literally plucked from wherever, and these heroes were put on to this stage. Actually, they were in space, and they see this world being created from the destruction around them. They see a hand, basically the hand of God. It's not the hand of God, destroying an entire galaxy in front of them. They're lost. Imagine being lost in space in this big bubble, a spaceship, and you can see outside, and all of a sudden this hand comes out and destroys all the galaxies and then creates a world for you to fight on, basically a battle world. And what were the first words that we saw, that we hear from, actually written on the page? I am from beyond. Okay. And that is the words that introduces us to the main antagonist or protagonist, the antagonist of this series, the Beyonder, the person who brought the heroes and the villains together for his own purpose, because he's been watching, and he was all alone in his own universe until something happened, a pinhole into another universe, and he saw everything that was happening in, let's just say, the Earth 616 universe, okay, for lack of a better word. And he's interested, he's very engaged in what's happening, and now he wants to bring it into his universe. And hey, you guys are always fighting against each other. Here's a battle world. Whoever survives gets whatever he wishes, their fondest wishes, of course. You got the heroes, they probably want world peace, although they don't say it. And on the other spaceship, on the other side of the universe, on the other galaxy, you see the villains, and I'm sure you know what they want. So, let me tell you this, as simplistic as that sounds, and of course I'm just giving you a very small paraphrasing of really what's happening. Who cares? I'm 12 years old. I don't need Odyssey, the Odyssey and the Iliad. You're giving me the small words and the big colors and these big guys. Galactus. Who the hell's Galactus? I didn't know who Galactus was. I'm in. You got me. Take my money. So yes, Chris, I understand that while the word, some of the words I was reading online beforehand, it's a little ham-fisted, a little simplistic. Some of the critics didn't like it. It wasn't for you. It was for me. They want to, James. He wants the $12. Wants to buy the toys. I don't care. So that was the introduction, and you got me. Even though I had to go back and read that because I read 11 first. Oh my God, it blew my mind. Sorry.
No. And listen, that makes sense. I don't think there's anything, I don't necessarily have a problem with the plot as it stands, because sure, it's we get, but a lot of these stories do have simple plots, and when we break them down, they can be even simpler than we originally thought. So,
right. Mm-hmm.
I'm all about this, as flies to wanton boys are we to the gods. They kill for their sport. Like the whole. I'm cool with that. I think for me, it's more the dialogue rather than the sometimes the characters have especially the smart characters, but also the sneaky characters have a way of telling us exactly what they're doing. That was more, and you're right, it's not for me. But the plot doesn't bother me at all, because the simplicity of, you look at some of these other plots, and I enjoy simple plots. If they're written, I'm good. So I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea of this, this all powerful being going, fuck it.
Kill him, and you get what you want. It can't be any more straight than that.
At that point, we're just watching Gladiator. It's fine.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Are we not entertained? Is this not what you're here for?
Well, I guess, some of the things now we'll dive into a little more, because that's the backstory for it in the backdrop. And I'm kind of curious, just because, again, it's taking out of a time period that I'm not fully familiar with those characters. I've not read everything, but it's kind of, I thought it was odd that, maybe it's not odd that the X-Men are we're going to retreat, we're going to separate from the X-Men, and then we're going to just come in and drop in when we need to. So Professor X, this is the first time he's leading again. So
walking no less. Yeah. Okay. You know what, James? You know what's great about that is that I didn't know about the X-Men at the time, so I found it a little bit strange rereading this story for the first time, how standoffish they were. But looking back at it, they were still mutants. And, even though most of them look like everybody else on that spaceship, that wasn't a lizard, it was, hey, you guys, we don't play in the same sandbox. You guys do not think that we are the same as you. So we're going to be over here doing our thing, trying to figure where the hell we are out. And, we're still cool. We're not going to go with Dr. Doom, but, we're not going to be hanging out with you guys. Okay. And it's fine. It's been that way ever since.
Yeah. The whole thing with the mistrust with the mutants, that obviously was set up years before, throughout the Marvel universe coming into this, but also it's there's Magneto there. You can throw Magneto into the mix, and he has a reputation.
Yes, he does,
as being a terrorist, and obviously people like Captain America and Reed Richards and Spider-Man are not going to trust Magneto.
No.
Some the Chris the thing is he was. I thought Professor X might have been a little too. How do we say this without getting thrown off of YouTube if we put it on YouTube?
He was a bit much. But he was also the first time, one, that he's walking, and two, that he felt able to lead his team that he's created for the last 30 freaking years. So you had Storm. Wait. Storm was there.
Storm had it out. Issue 5 or something. Yeah. I lead the X-Men. No, they're my X-Men. He kept saying they're my X-Men. They're my X-Men. Yeah. I remember that from the 60s version, but at this point we had moved on from that. But he's back now. They're my X-Men. He's walking, figuratively and literally, he's strutting around, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I thought it was out of character, but I guess it's not for the circumstances that they were in. Yeah, obviously, like you said, being God knows where and having witnessed God knows what. Yeah, he was at times he was a little too much to take.
Can I say I don't think I've ever read. Be serious, and again, I haven't read as much X-Men as Arco and Joe, obviously, and I plan to read more of the Claremont run. I've only read the highlights, but I don't think I've read a story where I like Professor X. Like the Professor X I like is Patrick Stewart. I don't think I've read Professor X, an X-Men book where I'm like, I like Professor X. I get why he's the leader. Most of the time, he's kind of acting like this, and so I don't know if I've read a book.
He's the other side of the coin of Magneto. They're basically the same character. They want to protect mutant kind, but they go about it in different ways. And so the villain goes about it one way, but the guy who's quote unquote the good guy, he's got do the ends justify the means?
Well, and also I gotta say this is an Xavier that we understand why he drives people away. We understand why mutants might be torn between him and Magneto, because it's not just the philosophy, it's also the approach, like that patronizing, that patronizing approach, that sometimes holier than thou approach. Like,
Very
there
much so.
is more. It's I appreciate the nuance of it, because I've always appreciated the nuance in the relationship between Xavier and Magneto. I've always liked that. I always liked the whole Magneto was right. I loved, again, X-Men 94, 96, which is it?
97.
97. So I'm wrong on both counts. So X-Men 97, I like that it's that you can, again, you can go either way. So yes, I agree with you, James. I think for me, he was a lot, especially because by comparison, for me, I'm like Team Magneto in Secret Wars. So yeah, very patronizing, but like you, James, I also didn't read nearly as much X-Men as Arco and Joe, obviously.
I also found it interesting that Magneto was originally put with the good guys, which is sort of that whole two sides of the same coin.
Right. But by that point, he was already starting to make the shift over to anti-hero, and they were starting to write him in a way that was a little bit more sympathetic to his original backstory. They do mention at this point, at some point in this series, and I can't remember the exact issue, where he killed some people, the submarine, the Russians, and he said, self-defense. We've spoken about it in the past. He's like, they were going to kill me. What do you want me to do? And they had nuclear weapons on there, although I'm not sure if they were looking to, kill him with nuclear weapons, but they were looking to kill me. This was self-defense. Okay. And yeah, it's always going to be a murderer, and I'm sure he's killed some other people through the years, obviously, in the comics, but they did mention that.
Well, that's interesting. I want to turn this into an X-Men podcast, but Arco's here, so why not? But that's the only kills Magneto ever takes responsibility for, right? Because I think we always think of Magneto as a terrorist who's killed a lot of people, but in reality, when you read these books, he's just like, well, I just killed that one time, and that was it.
As far as I remember. Yeah, as far as I remember, that's the one kills that they really pin on him. We've seen a lot of backstories since then about things that he's done when he was younger and who he's had to kill to, just survive, which is understandable. But he never, he's been able to do so many bad things. He's taken over little, Central American nations and everything, and nobody ever dies. So, this was the one time that he actually went brutal. He really went medieval on them, and in self-defense, and it's never been held against him as if he was a mass murderer. So
interesting. Yeah, I just like the interest of the backstory of the character where we are. But to get back to the story, so we have I thought Galactus was an interesting choice to include.
Oh yeah.
Gotta bring Galactus.
And I like how they write, of the things that I like written, I like how Galactus is written that he doesn't even notice what's going on. He doesn't also care. He's like, I'm going to eat this world.
Yeah. He's on the mountain waiting for his ride, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I like that he's going to eat the only planet in this universe and kill himself and everybody else.
He's a big guy. He gets hungry.
And I like that Dr. Doom immediately takes control. I thought this was a very well written Dr. Doom.
Very well.
He immediately, and he tries to fly with Galactus and gets smacked down, and then Kang tries to kill him, and I liked all the antics between the villains too.
I really see, and for me, Doom gets a lot more nuanced than a lot of the other characters. I like the moments he has, like when he, gosh, please remind me, who is it that he recruits and then he sends back with his orders, and then he gives them the password so that
Claw.
I'm sorry. Claw, yes. Yeah, when he sends Claw back and they're like, who are you? How do we know your orders are real? And Claw's like, robot, pay attention. And then says the code. And now Ultron goes, these are Doom's orders. Like, that was a fun moment. I liked that foresight from Doom. I like that he delegates.
I like the fact that, and I didn't know this obviously till much later, but he was killed before Secret Wars started. He was officially dead quote unquote. He died fighting Terex the Tamer when Doom took the Silver Surfer's power. Got the power cosmic. Went after Silver Surfer, the Fantastic Four. They all fought, and he ended up dying and was reduced to a puddle of nothing in the middle of New York City. So, Reed Richards telling Captain America issue 7 or 8, he's like, he was dead. He was dead just last week. I don't know how he's here right now. So, reading that as a little kid, it blows your mind. And then seeing that later on when I bought those Fantastic Four issues was very cool how that happened.
Looks great for a dead man. He's fantastic.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
he's like wasn't phased a bit. Didn't slow Doom down at all.
No.
And even Enchantress, what offers him power, offers like her hand, and he's like,
she offers a lot.
Yeah, she sure does offer a lot.
She offers a lot to a lot of people.
I had no idea who that was. I'm like, who is this woman? I couldn't believe that. First of all, I couldn't believe that they were like showing it like that. I was 12 years old. I'm like, is this legit? And she was putting herself out there with Thor and everything. And, so again, introduction of characters to me as a kid. You did everything you needed to do, Jim Shooter. You got me.
So, and Dr. Doom is able to figure out how to transport people from our reality into his. So he creates Titania and
no. Hold on, no. Titania and Titania and Volcana were part of the Denver suburbs that were brought over as part of Battleworld. So a part of Denver, because the universe is very small, as you know. So let's take a piece of the United States and bring it to Battleworld. And that was part of the Battleworld that he created. And Doom was able to find those two and give them, power that they craved.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know if I must have skipped. I don't think I recognized that was a piece of that area.
Denver. Oh yeah. Well, that's where that shadowy figure came from in issue 7. Yes.
Yes. Something's coming back. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then at this time, Wasp is the head of the Avengers, right?
Yes, the head of the Avengers. Although, like many times before and after, I don't even know why she ever did this. It became the head of the Avengers, the leader, because everybody's like, "Hey, Cap, you want this? You got this? All right, cool. You go ahead." And they, Captain America is the leader of all leaders. Everybody knows it, and they're going to just bow to him. Yeah, I'm the leader of the Fantastic Four, but you got this.
Well, I mean, the way Shooter writes her, she's complaining about she breaks a nail. I mean,
her hair. I know.
She's written like Taylor Swift. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and they don't dig into because it's a missed opportunity, right? Like they could dig into what it's like to try and lead with Cap around, because how do you do that? And there are times where it feels like they start to go that way a little bit, but for me, at least the way Wasp is written, she's written so whiny and so sort of stereotypically feminine.
Mm-hmm.
I broke a nail, I did this, I did that, oh, my hands got dirty, right? Which is like, come on.
She wasn't written that way in the Avengers book at the time. No, I don't think so.
It feels like a little bit of missed. We could really dig into this, especially because you could see too. There's so much that's interesting about Cap giving away leadership and not necessarily, and constantly turning to and saying, "What do you think, Janet?" And then what it's like when people still turn to him, and he's just the nicest guy in the world, and he's not. He just wants to help. I'm just here. So it could create a really interesting dynamic, but we're also robbed a little bit of that since Wasp spends so much time apart from the other Avengers.
But I don't think that this was the platform that they needed to really bring about those changes. In only 12 issues, we don't need to see a battle for leadership. You have to have the battle between the villains and the heroes, because they want to go home. So
it's funny you say that, though, because we do get a battle for leadership. It's just over on the mutant side between Charles and Storm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I thought it was the writing of the women in the book, at least for the first 6 issues, is interesting because there are strong women, and there are strong women that speak their mind. It's sort of the choices that Jim Shooter made. Like Wasp in particular is not written well. Obviously, Titania is a strong woman. Captain Marvel is a strong woman because she doesn't put up. So I'm just curious. Like, it's just interesting the choices that were made with some of the female characters. They,
Captain Marvel is a strong woman who gets frozen as a hologram for 10 issues. So they take her out of it, from issue 2 or issue 3, and she's sitting there as a hologram until issue 11. So yeah, you're right. Jim Shooter probably made some choices that he probably wouldn't do now. This is the 80s, and I think that we got away with a lot. Yeah, they could have done a lot worse. Let's put it that way.
Of course. I'm just making a note of it that it is like the potential is there for some of the characters that are written and others. So it's just like it was a writing choice at the time for whatever reason.
Right.
We won't know unless.
I'm sorry, James.
Even in one of the battles on the show, we can ask him about it.
Yes.
Even in one of the battles, and there's so many, there's talk, there's a battle, there's talk, there's a battle. But I forget what battle it was. But Thor is down already, So it's kind of like Justice League books when there's a big battle. They got to take out Superman first, because if you don't take out Superman first, you don't take Thor out first, then they're going to take out. I don't care how many villains are rushing. They're going to take them all out in a split second. So you get these kind of tropes here that have to be done when you bring all these characters together. It's bothersome, yes, but you understand why it's done. I mean, he could have left Thor out of this.
Again, but we're talking about this as we're talking in 2024 comic book fans. It's saying it's bothersome. We've seen this. I didn't see it. This is the first time I see it. You can take out the big guy? Sure. Go ahead. Give me more. I don't care. Inject it into my veins. I don't care. Okay. So yes, it's not entirely fair to the story and to the writer. We're not going to say writers. We're going to say the writer that we are bashing. Okay, yes, it's simplistic. It's got a lot of tropes to it, but it's what the time was, and for the most part, again, they're not going for 50-year-old Arco. They're going for 12-year-old Arco, and they got me.
I love it.
I do like the.
Sorry, go ahead, James.
No, I was gonna say I do like the inclusion of Thor. I actually, I don't know what it takes. I guess it takes time because I'm not familiar with a lot of Thor's catalog, and I'm only really familiar with him through the MCU. But Thor literally is a god. Like, he can't be killed. Like, when all the wrecking crew is like building up on him, it is like maybe slowing him down and annoyance. But to like Thor is like the wrecking crew is to Thor what Thor is to Galactus. Like
the wrecking crew, and I didn't realize this either because I didn't know who the wrecking crew was. But the wrecking crew is rogues of Thor. They were created by Loki. These guys were construction workers who were robbing people on the side with a crowbar, and he literally enchanted their construction equipment. A crowbar, a wrecking ball. I mean, one of them runs, bulldozer runs and beats people with his head. So it's the funniest thing, but it slows them down. But Thor has never been the powerful god that we know him as today until today. He was a god, but what did we know about gods back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s? The way that they overpowered him now. I mean, now is the time where he is like just overpowered. He wasn't like that back then. You could take him out.
Okay,
good point.
Okay.
And really quickly, I want to go back quickly. When you're talking about bashing a book, what I want to say is this is part of the reason I wanted to come in with some more curiosity. And if any of this comes across as bashing, I apologize. The reason I say that, though, is I think when I was younger, my intention was to undercut and talk about why this book was bad.
Okay.
Now I found that more often than not, especially when it comes to comics and superheroes and comic book stories, when we talk about a character and we can voice a thing and then we just move past it. Now if somebody says, "Oh, I don't really like Batman." Okay, that's cool. Why don't you like Batman? Well, he's not realistic. No, he's not. As long as we are on the same page about, we're on the same page about that, right? And that's where I think that like a lot of the Marvel stuff, not just Marvel, DC too, but we're talking about Marvel. A lot of the Marvel stuff, we mentioned simplistic. Sure, it helps. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. It helps me to say it out loud, to be able to say, "Oh yeah, I know what I'm getting into when I know it's a simple story." Okay, great. Now I can just enjoy a simple story, right?
As long as you enjoy it,
right?
As long as you enjoy it,
right? And I think that's where, at least for me, some of the criticism comes from, of being able to say the thing out loud, and then everybody's like, "Oh yeah, no, that didn't age well at all." And it's like, okay, we're all on the same page about that. Yeah. That we all feel like there are certain characters that it's like, no, this was cool. Other characters maybe got underused, and that's going to happen in any big effort, including this many characters. And again, not just heroes, but all the villains. It's like, no, some of these characters are going to be less interesting than others. That's the way that it goes. Like there has to be choice. So I think that's the other thing, is like being able to acknowledge, like, oh no, this is, if you're a big fan of Punisher, this may not be the book for you, right? Whereas, like,
well, no, they definitely didn't have the Punisher, because I can imagine him taking out some alien asses on Battle World. So that would have been hell. I didn't even know who the Punisher was back then.
Oh God, why would you?
No, I didn't.
I think there are certain. It's also interesting now in context of, because you guys were talking about, this is what got me into superheroes. This is what got me in there. It's interesting now because there's so much other stuff out there that's like, that you can't miss. You can't miss Deadpool and Wolverine, like it exists.
Right.
It's interesting because I'm curious as to whether or not Secret Wars serves as good an entry, especially with the upcoming MCU. Is it a good entry into superheroes the way that it used to be? Because you have people that are now going like, I just saw Deadpool and I like Deadpool, and that's why I'm like, I'll try here. So I'm kind of curious about that. I know you were going to say something, Joe, but I'm throwing it out there first.
No, one of my criticisms of this, from the writing point, is something that I'm not looking back for the 2024 eye. I've been reading comic books at this point for about 18 years. And there was one thing that always bothered me in DC, because the dialogue was awfully stilted in DC books compared to Marvel books at the time, especially in the 60s and early 70s, until Denny O'Neil started writing more. But obviously this is a book where he has to introduce all these characters to first-time readers. There's a lot of there's that I in front of the person's name. It reminded me of reading a DC comic book then, from like the mid 60s. And, maybe, again, so we're looking back now, maybe there should have been some type of, if this was done today, especially if Hickman was doing it, there would be charts. There would be 3 or 4 pages of charts of who everybody was and where they came from.
And there were, when he did his.
Yes. Yeah,
and there were, exactly. So that's, but as you pointed out earlier, Arco, about exposition, it surprised me then that a writer of Jim Shooter's caliber could not get around some of these things and make it a little more palatable.
I think that, for lack of a better word, he kind of dumbed it down for the audience that he was looking for.
Yeah.
And I have no problem reading.
Only 13, 14 years old. Okay, yes.
Yeah, I have no problem reading I, Kang the Conqueror, am about to do this, because I had no idea who Kang the Conqueror was. So please, thank you very much for telling me your name. Okay, first and foremost, okay? I, Ultron, the robot, thank you. I have no idea who you were. Galactus doesn't seem to be talking, so thankfully somebody brought about his name. But that's just it. A lot of this was put together for... Yes, obviously it worked better for people who knew who Galactus was, who Kang was. Yes, but it had no matter to me. This guy in a purple hat got vaporized at the end of issue 1. I loved it. I'm all on board. I don't care who Kang was. He's dead now, obviously, because he just died on the page. So, but it was great. So I needed that exposition. I needed the dumbing down. I'm sorry, Jim Shooter, if that's the wrong way of putting it, and you probably didn't do it that way, but it worked for me. It worked for a 12-year-old Arco.
Well, I think that's like I think it's an interesting question that you did raise there, Chris, though, and I'd be curious, like, with like what's coming with Marvel's MCU, Secret Wars is down the pipeline. People will probably be picking up this book. Hopefully, I really don't know if like movies really transfer into book sales. From what I've heard, not really, but who knows? Like, would this be a book that a new reader should, like, looking back, like on Arco, especially from you, who has love for? Would this be a book a new reader should read?
Yeah. Well. Okay, two points here. One, to answer Chris, could this be something that somebody today would have the same impact on them picking it up as it did us? No, because we did not have the internet back then. It was word to mouth. I didn't go to Comic Cons like Joe did, so I would not know. I didn't know that something called Marvel Age was there to tell me that something was coming down the pipeline. So no, this was seeing it and smacking me in the face the second I saw it. Whereas now you have a teaser clip of a movie 2 years in advance. So no, I don't think it would have the same impact. However, people may want to refer back to this source material if they find that they are going to get some of it from here. I was under the impression that Secret Wars is actually going to be Incursion Secret Wars, which makes it 2015 Secret Wars to me, rather than this, even though they had something called Battle World there. So I think that they would actually be lost reading 1984 Secret Wars as opposed to 2015 Secret Wars. My opinion.
My only, like I said, was saying before, the only reason why I think there will be some 1984 in there is because the Russos have said if they were to come back, they want to do the original Secret Wars. So even though there's incursions and stuff, I have no I could
all right.
I feel like if they came back, if like Feige was like, no, we're doing Hickman, it's like, oh no, but we're gonna have a guy in a John Travolta white suit also show up, and he's gonna be, gonna be the Beyonder, and he's gonna be the guy like bringing Doom to Battle World
with that Jerry Curl mullet. Oh, so 1985.
So I know nothing about what they're doing except that they're using the title, but I just feel like there will be some aspect of this book that will transfer into what they are planning. I mean, at the bare minimum, I mean, Doctor Doom was in both, and maybe that's where they'll decide to pull out the black costume in the MCU because of all the, I mean, spoilers, audience, that's the back half of Secret Wars. That's where Spider-Man's black costume comes from, and I think that was one of the probably the most significant thing that came out of this series was that costume.
Well, yeah, it's the number one thing that came out of that costume. It came out of the series. It's absolutely, positively the biggest thing, and that's why issue 8 is worth buku dollars. Especially if you get it graded.
How's your copy looking, Arco?
I have 3 copies, and they're not looking good enough to be graded, but they're mine. So that's fine.
I sold.
That's great. That's great.
I sold 2 in mint condition. My copies at least a 9.4. I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So real fast, James. I know you wanted to go over some of these, and I know some of us have to leave because the Mets game is on. However, the Yankees game is on. However, I do want to say something about some of these issues, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Issue 1 is basically just setting up exactly what's going on here, and basically the backstory. Okay, you got the villains, you got the and the heroes. Issue 2 is when the action starts. Okay, and you have 2 tiers of villains. You have Doctor Doom, and then you have everybody else. And everybody else is not as smart as Doctor Doom. So what are they going to do? They want to fight immediately. And what happens? They get their asses kicked. They go back home to Doctor Doom, and Doctor Doom is like, all right, you guys work for me now, or else Ultron will kill you. And that's exactly what happened when he killed Kang. And seems like it's going to be pretty easy for the heroes the whole way because it's only issue 2 and they've already won once. But it's not about just fighting the villains. Issue 3, the issue is called the battle within. Excuse me, the crisis within, and you have the X-Men fighting. Everybody's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, what's happening here. So now you're starting to see a little bit of fracture between, within the heroes, and that is what's going to be leading to issue 4, where all of a sudden you see issue 4 is a mountain. It's just a mountain, and at the bottom of the mountain, at the bottom of the issue, you see the heroes underneath it. Because at some point Dr. Doom decided to tell Molecule Man, "Hey, you're a pretty powerful guy. Can you pick up that mountain range over there, the Rocky Mountains over there? Can you do that?" And he goes, "No." No, he said, "Yes, you can." Sure enough, he could, and he dropped it on them. Well, I mean, they should be dead, right? But of course, what do you have? You have the angry Hulk, and you have a few of the heroes that were able to notch themselves a little nook where they were able to survive, and they somehow find their way out of there. James, how simplistic is that? I mean, how Chris and Joe, a trope, can you drop something so huge, everybody should be dead, but of course they're not. But you know what? Who cares? It was great. I got to see these guys bust out of the Rocky Mountain range, okay? Because and they ended up surviving. And the Hulk, when he says, "I'm going." That I'm getting angrier and angrier. And this is where they used them for the first time, not the last time in the whole series. Issue 5, you have the X-Men finally getting their action on, and they come and join the fight. Professor X says, "All right, guys, it's time to get in there." And this is what you said. Professor X is kind of a douche in this. He picks and chooses when we're going to fight, when it serves our purpose. And he wants to actually, and he does actually, meet up with Magneto, and they join forces together. And the heroes don't like that because Magneto is the terrorist. Magneto is he's the bad guy. He's killed people. So, but just like all things mutant, you will have a place with the X-Men. All right. This is where they have Rogue. I don't know if people realize that, but Rogue was a villain just 10 issues earlier, where she's trying to kill people. Now she's part of the X-Men. She's thinking herself. She says, "I could have been on the other side just 5 issues ago. 5 issues ago, I would have been on that side, in the other side over there." Okay, so you have the X-Men fighting in the 5th issue, fighting against the villains. You have Wolverine jumping out from behind a rock and slashing the arm off of Absorbing Man. "Hey, buddy, what's going on?" And I had never seen something like that. They literally cut somebody's arm off on there. And Absorbing Man, what does he do? He's like, "I don't know. This has never happened to me before." He goes, "Let me put it back into place and let me see if I change, if it'll stick." And he goes, and it's stuck. And he's like, "Oh, I feel nauseous. Let me go sit down." Crazy stuff like that. I didn't know who Wolverine was. I didn't know he could do that. He came out of nowhere. He's like, "I'm just gonna, cut this guy's arm off." So, while there was a lot of exposition and a lot of needless, in my opinion, a lot of needless storytelling that didn't need to be told, there was so much action in every single issue. Not one issue was boring to me. Looking back on it, even now, you look at it, every single issue had something going on. And it's only by luck that only a few people died, in this, including the Wasp in issue 6, I believe, issue 6, when she gets shot in the swamp. She was with the lizard. If I'm not mistaken, it's issue 6.
Yeah, it is.
That's the cliffhanger for this podcast.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, she gets shot right through. She's talking to the lizard, trying to talk him down and everything, and all of a sudden, boom! She gets blown. Her chest gets blown up right on the page. I mean, I felt that. I felt that right here. So, it's it's, we can keep on going with this and everything, but for those who want to get into it, for those who have never heard of Secret Wars before, if you got small kids and they like comic books, I think James, Chris was correct. This is actually a very good story to get into. Trade paperback. It's it's got everything. It's got violence. It's got some scenes where you're like, maybe you don't want to read that right there, but it's got everything for a person getting into Marvel that they would possibly want to start them out.
Yeah, I think Arco, that's very well said. I think it's a very good book to start a new reader off because you get all these characters. You do get the introductions, right? You get those, so you know who they are.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
you get to see their power set because there's so many
yeah,
battles.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, in that sense, yes, I would give this to a 10-year-old or even
yeah,
an 8-year-old and say, look, this is what Dad or Grandpa read back in the day.
yeah.
And yeah,
They're seeing far worse on YouTube. Let's put it that
oh my
way.
God,
Okay. Okay. Come
they're
on. I
seeing
mean, they're
far
seeing.
worse at their local comic store, the
Yeah.
stuff that Marvel's putting out right now. Trust me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as far as that goes, anybody wants to get a kid started in a limited series to get them going, exactly, to get them going to see who these people were or are still to this day. This is definitely a great story for you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good snapshot of who everybody
Hmm.
is, and it gives
Yeah.
you a good foundation of. Well, I mean, obviously we've spoken about like the MCU is the Marvel universe to many people, but if anyone has read a comic book, most of the characters you've seen on screen are in this book in some
Yeah,
capacity.
absolutely.
So
However, if you go by the toys, for some reason, you won't see Hobgoblin, Daredevil, Baron Zemo, and a few others. And I never understood why when I was a kid. I'm like, but they're not in the comic. I mean, who's this Baron Zemo guy?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, a few years later, he was the bigwig in the Masters of Evil, taking down the Avengers. But that's another story.
Mhm.
yeah, the toys are very confusing. I mean, I love the toy line, but they definitely they had one mold that they just made different heads for, and they
Yes.
painted all the bodies differently. So
Yes.
because
Yes.
I was like, well, why is there no Mr. Fantastic? Why is there no Human Torch? Why is there no Thing?
Why is there no thing? Yeah.
Yeah, why is
Yeah,
there
that's right.
Hulk? They couldn't do a Hulk because that would bust the mold. You'd have to make a whole.
The Hulk could have been the Thing mold, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Right. I
Absolutely.
mean,
So
Um,
I still love those toys.
Yeah, they were great. I
the
agree.
one villain that's conspicuous by his absence, and tell me if I'm right, Marco, because I don't remember. I only read issue 6, but there's no Loki, right?
No, there's no Loki.
That was strange reading the first 6 issues. What the hell is Loki? Why isn't he?
Yeah, no. Loki. I believe they really wanted heroes that were and villains, for lack of a better word, that were a little bit more down to earth in what their wishes might be and their desires, because that's what the Beyonder was giving them. I know that Galactus blows that theory out of the water, but for the most part, you have these heroes and villains that are pretty much black and white in what they want. Cap would want world peace. Spider-Man would want peace in his head. The Absorbing Man wants all the power in the world. Doctor Doom wants all the power in the world. So I mean, their desires are very much black and white. And
Loki wants the throne of Asgard, though. So I mean, but
yeah. I don't forget, if you may not remember this, but this happened in the middle of the Surtur saga of 337 to 351, which was So that's why I think. Yeah. And by the way, James and anybody else out there, if you ever want to read a Thor book and a storyline, the Surtur saga, starting with Beta Ray Bill's a first appearance in 337 and ending in 351 or 352, I apologize, it is my number one Thor storyline of all time. So there you go.
I have honorable mentions for 80s books here, and that's one of them. Yeah.
That's amazing. In fact, that you can get the trade paperback. I don't know what it looks like today, but you can get the trade paperback.
I think they collected them in the Walt Simonson.
Walt Simon. That's when Walt Simonson took over the writing and the artwork of that. He also worked with his wife, if I'm not mistaken. So it may have been Louise writing and him drawing. So
Wheezy, that's right.
Wheezy. Sorry, I didn't want to go off tangent there, but
it's a great run. Everybody should read that run.
Yeah.
Well, great. I think we've gotten a good wrap of like 1 through 6.
Yeah.
And so, audience, we will be returning to Battle World at some point in the future in 2025 to talk about 7 through 12 and have more to talk about.
And I think that's really the crux of the entire story, with a lot happens there. So we can delve, in an hour's time for those 6 issues, we'll be able to delve into them a lot deeper, with a little bit more nuanced, and talk about my one of my favorite 1980s artists, Mike Zeck.
Yes, let's do. We didn't talk much about the art. You're right, but Mike Zeck, yeah.
Oh yes, yeah. We'll have to give Mike Zeck some more love in the.
Yeah, absolutely, we will.
Episode.
His cap run is amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Joe, you have any final thoughts? I know Arco gave us a summation, sort of.
No, I'm glad Arco was here because I'm going to read the rest of it now. He got me kind of psyched.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad. Again, you were. It's not to say that you're an old person. You're not. You say
I am.
Old. I don't say no. But I really think that I think that the thought that the generation, it may be a little bit more dumbed down, again, for lack of a better word. I'm sorry, I apologize. Then you may have enjoyed at the time when reading some of the stuff that you were reading. But a person at 12 years old, or a person like James getting into the toys and seeing what's on the pages, it was perfect.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. I will say also, which a Marvel Legends Hasbro decided to sell as celebrating the 40th anniversary. Also, they made Secret Wars figures, retro figures.
Really?
They made the Black Spider-Man, Captain America, Iron Man, but then they added, that was not in the original toy line, Titania. And also the Beyonder has a figure, which they never made a Beyonder figure.
No, they never made it. But I mean, does he have a white white suit?
He's got the white suit.
Wait. That suit wasn't in this series. It was in the much maligned and hated Secret Wars 2 a year later, drawn by
your favorite artist, Al Milgrom.
Al Milgrom. Oh God, I got his autograph. So I hate that I give him such a bad rap. I apologize, but God, I couldn't stand that art.
Well,
yeah. I still like what Al Milgrom did on the West Coast Avengers.
Yeah, I don't know why they made the Beyonder in a Secret Wars series, but I guess they were figuring like, why not? Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
So listening audience, I hope you've enjoyed this part 1 of 1984 Secret Wars, written by Jim Shooter and Mike Zeck with the art. I could obviously not do this podcast without my 2 comic book historians. So thank you, Joe, for being here.
You're welcome, James. Thank you very much for having me again. And Arco, this is a surprise. I know you're going to be here. I'm so happy you showed up and your vast Marvel knowledge.
Thank you. I can't tell you. I mean, trust me. James texted me yesterday about that it's today. I thought I missed it yesterday, and I was very upset. So I'm so happy that I could do this. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Thank you very much, James and Joe, for allowing me. And Chris, I know you had to bug out, but thank you guys for having me.
Yes, Arco. Thank you, the master of Marvel. Thank you, Arco, for being here. And then Chris, unfortunately, got taken away by Kang. So Chris cannot be here to say goodbye, but
maybe Loki showed up.
We will catch up with him and when we return to Battle World for our part 2. So, listeners, we appreciate you always joining us, and we will talk to you on the next episode.